The rain pelted the rusted tin roof of the small wooden hut like a drum roll, waking little Armin before dawn. The world was still dark outside, but his eyes were bright with determination. He quietly slipped out of his thin blanket, careful not to wake his two younger siblings still asleep beside him. Their mother had been up all night coughing again, the sound hidden only by the roar of thunder. But Armin had a promise to keep. He laced up his only pair of shoes, cracked at the heel and frayed at the toes, then grabbed his school bag. It was more patched than fabric now, but it held his most precious possessions: a notebook, 2 pencils, and a dream. 10 miles. That was the distance between his village and the nearest school. Each morning, he set off before the sun, his feet moving through winding dirt paths, thick forests, and icy riverbeds. The walk was long and hard. Sometimes there were snakes, sometimes strangers. There were days the mud sucked the shoes right off his feet. But there was something Armin knew deep in his heart. Education was his only ticket out. He would whisper the same words to himself every day. If I can make it today, I can make it tomorrow. A boy and his promise. Armin's father had passed away when he was just 6, leaving their mother to raise 3 children alone. She worked tirelessly, stitching clothes for neighbors during the day and weaving baskets at night, just to buy rice and keep a roof overhead. She always said, "I didn't go to school, but my children will." It wasn't easy. There were months when there wasn't enough to eat. Sometimes Armin would pretend he wasn't hungry so his siblings could have more. On many school days, his stomach rumbled louder than the classroom fan. But even hunger couldn't stop him. He was the first to reach school, despite being the one who traveled the farthest. Teachers noticed him, quiet, thin, always seated in the front row, always asking questions, always grateful. When the other children ran to the canteen at break, Armin would stay back. Reading the torn science book a teacher had lent him, he would copy every diagram, memorize every term. "I want to be a doctor," he told anyone who asked. Some laughed. "You think a village boy can become a doctor? Just walking to school won't get you there." But Armin never talked back. He simply smiled and kept walking. The Ophil Battle High School was even farther, 12 miles away. That meant earlier mornings, colder rivers, and longer walks. But Armin welcomed it. The more difficult the journey, the sweeter the dream. He studied under streetlights when the electricity went out. He borrowed books, took notes on old newspapers when he ran out of pages. He helped his mother in the evenings, then studied into the night. When exam results came in, his name was on top, always. The village began to notice. A few neighbors started offering him books. One kind farmer even gave him a bicycle. It was old and rusted, but to Armin, it felt like a gift from the heavens. He still had to carry it across rivers and push it up rocky hills, but it cut his travel time and gave him precious extra hours to study. Years passed. When it was time for the final high school board exams, Armin fell ill. Fever, chills, and fatigue gripped him for a week. He couldn't even sit up. His mother wept beside him, thinking the dream might be slipping away. But on the day of his first exam, Armin stood up. He held his mother's trembling hands and said, "I didn't come this far to stop now." He walked the 12 miles, slower this time, his legs weaker, but with more determination than ever before, and he passed. With distinction. Medical school, the impossible dream. Armin's acceptance into medical college came like a miracle. It was posted on a dusty notice board at the town's district office. He stared at his name for a full minute, unable to breathe. He ran all the way home, tears streaming down his face. But then came the next obstacle: money. Tuition was impossible. Even if they sold everything, it wouldn't be enough. For days, he didn't sleep. The dream was at his fingertips and slipping. Then, like an answered prayer, his teachers came together. They wrote letters, made calls, even contributed from their own salaries. A scholarship foundation visited the village and, after meeting Armin and reading his application, offered to sponsor his full education. His mother cried for hours that night, not from worry, but from pride. Armin left the village with a single bag, his mother's blessings, and a notebook filled with his siblings' drawings. The city was loud and strange, and he was surrounded by students from wealthier backgrounds who had grown up with computers, coaching, and comfort. He had none of that, But he had something they didn't. He had walked 10 miles a day, every day for 10 years. He had faced hunger, sickness, and ridicule, and still made it. That kind of fire didn't fade easily. He sat in the front of every lecture hall. He read while eating. He took part, timed jobs in the evenings, and tutored other students just to buy medical supplies. He sent half of whatever he earned back home, and every weekend, without fail, he called his mother and said, "One day, you won't have to work anymore. I promise." Becoming Dr. Armin years later, on the day of his graduation, Armin stood at the podium as the top student in his medical class. The crowd of students, professors, and families applauded as he received his degree, but his eyes searched only for one face, his mother. She had arrived wearing the same simple clothes, her hands still calloused from years of labor, but her smile lit up the entire hall. When he embraced her, she whispered, "Your father would be so proud." And Armin knew. It had all been worth it. He returned to his village soon after, not to leave again but to give back. He opened a small clinic right near the edge of the forest, in the very same village where people once laughed at his dream. He treated every patient with the same care he had once hoped to receive. He never turned anyone away for lack of money. He started free health camps in surrounding villages. He partnered with local schools to give talks on hygiene, nutrition, and health. He even began mentoring young students with big dreams, just like he once had. The children called him Dr. Armin. But to the villagers, he was still the boy who walked barefoot across rivers with a book in his hand and a fire in his soul. The legacy of a long walk. One afternoon, a reporter visited the village to write about Dr. Armin's inspiring journey. She asked him, "What kept you going all those years? Why didn't you ever give up?" Armin looked out toward the path he had walked for so long, the path carved into his memory by hope and hardship. He smiled and said, "Because I knew someone, somewhere, needed a doctor who understood what it felt like to have nothing but a dream." Today, his story is told in classrooms. His photo hangs in the school he once walked to every day. Parents now point him out to their children and say, "If he could do it, so can you." Because Armin's journey wasn't just about medicine, it was about resilience. About how distance means nothing when your will is strong. About how even the smallest flame of hope can light the way through the darkest forests. And most of all, it's about how one boy's 10-mile walk every day turned into 1,000 miles of inspiration for others.